They were told they weren't needed, told they weren't strong enough, smart enough, or white enough, and when the world went to war, they signed up anyway.
They weren't given weapons, they were given mountains of moldy mail, and they turned chaos into connection, one handwritten letter at a time.
This is the story of the 6,888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, a battalion of black women who saved morale on the front lines of World War II, and a warning about the institution they built, now under attack.
Welcome to Moms Against the Machine, the podcast where two stay-at-home moms in suburban Texas break down the systems that are breaking us.
I'm Chelsey. I'm raising two kids in a state that wants to erase their future, so I speak up loudly.
And I'm Jen. I've got teenagers and a fire in my belly that only burns hotter every time I hear someone say, "That's just how it is."
Even you saying it,
I want to punch somebody.
I know. This week, we're digging into the story of the 6,888, the only all-black, all-woman U.S. military unit deployed overseas during World War II.
And we're going to show you how the same institution that held together the U.S. Postal Service is being dismantled on purpose by the same people attacking vote by mail, rural access, and democracy itself.
This one's personal. For us, for our kids, for every vet, every postal worker, every rural family, every voter. This is about legacy, labor, and why protecting the Postal Service is about way more than just mail. Don't call them mail sorters. They were war machines in ski pants, tossed into chaos and told to clean up a mess that the U.S. Army had already given up on.
By 1945, warehouses across Europe were choked with millions of letters, undelivered, unopened, and unread. Some dated back 3 years. Letters to dead men, letters from dying mothers, packages full of food infested with rats, stuffed animals black with mold, photos curling with decay, hope rotting in real time.
And the Army had no plan, so they turned to black women, not because they believed in them, but because they didn't care what happened to them.
They were sent overseas with no fanfare, no briefing, no backup. They landed in England and immediately faced buzz bombs, discrimination, and suspicion. And they walked into a warehouse with broken windows, no heat, and stacks of mail so high you had to climb over bags to reach the back wall.
They were told you've got 6 months to fix it. No computers, no gloves, no lights, just handwritten locator cards and names like Robert Smith printed thousands of times. No breaks, no excuses, and no room for mistakes.
They worked 24/7, rotating shifts in freezing air, fingers bleeding, boots falling apart. They used ski pants, field jackets, and raw grit to stay warm enough to keep going. And they didn't just clear the backlog. They did it in half the time that the Army expected, 3 months flat.
And their reward? Just orders to do it again, this time in France. They arrived in Rouen to find entire buildings leveled by bombs. Mail soaked in blood and urine, more rats, more rot, mail for soldiers already buried in unnamed graves, and again they sorted every last piece.
They got no mental health support, no counseling, no backup, just another quota, another cold shift, another pile of unopened grief.
Then came Paris. A glimmer of relief, housed in hotels for the first time. Beds with sheets, food that wasn't spoiled, and you know what they did? They kept working. Even as the battalion shrank from 855 to 558, even as men got sent home and women were told to pick up their slack, even as the country they were serving kept pretending that they didn't exist.
They handled 17 million pieces of mail, by hand, by torch, by force of will. They kept 7 million Americans tethered to home, all while being treated like property.
They weren't attached to a mail unit, M-A-L-E, they were attached to an M-A-I-L unit, because the Army didn't want the trouble. So they ran everything themselves. Their own military police, their own supply chain, their own chapel. They didn't just do the job, they built the damn system.
They weren't asked to be heroes, they were asked to be invisible. And they said, hell no.
They sorted America's heartbreak, piece by piece, and then were erased from the record like they never mattered. Not on our watch. Let's stop dancing around the word. These women were abused. Not just ignored, not just overlooked. They were abused by the system that they served.
At Fort Oglethorpe, the women of the 6,888 Battalion were required to shower in stalls without curtains. Open, exposed, watched. not just by female officers, but by men. It was intimidation, degradation, and it was punishment for being black and female in a white man's army.
Their uniforms were mismatched sizes, they were torn, they were secondhand. White units got replacements. They were told to sew their own. Their winter coats didn't fit, their boots were cracked, their gloves arrived weeks late in the middle of a British winter, sorting mail in unheated warehouses where your breath froze to your tongue.
They were also fed last, given leftovers when there were any. Sometimes they had to eat standing up outside while white officers dined in heated tents just yards away. If they spoke up, they were labeled uppity, insubordinate, or a disciplinary risk.
The mail they sorted was sometimes caked in blood. There were boxes addressed to men who'd been blown apart in France, some filled with shattered chocolates, rotted meat, or stuffed animals soaked in mold. They sorted through that with bare hands. No gloves, no masks, and still had to repack it to give the illusion that the system worked.
I mean, when you think about it, that's just so gross and unsanitary. And they did it without complaining. They just plugged along. Like,
they didn't have PPE. It took them
I
forever to get it.
What? That's disgusting. Oh. And even worse, when they menstruated, they had no supplies, no tampons or pads. They had to ration rags, often sharing what little they had or cutting up their pillowcases and fashioning belts out of rope. Officers wouldn't requisition menstrual products because it wasn't the priority for them.
When are women's bodies ever a priority for anybody besides completely regulating them?
Vessels for whatever
for childbirth.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Or, I mean, there's been a lot of other stuff lately. There's a lot coming to the surface for men with audacity.
Yeah.
And I'm sick of them. They're gross. And
I am too.
I've wanted to vomit repeatedly watching them.
Same.
Who was the guy that... I know he was on your story. I saw him before he was on your story.
What guy?
The one that said that some women enjoy being essayed.
Yes, he's some blogger guy, Andrew Wilson or something.
He needs to go back into whatever hole he came out of because that's unacceptable.
I mean, he obviously does not know how to pleasure a woman. It's very obvious to me. Or a man who knows how to pleasure a woman wouldn't say such a deplorable thing ever.
No, just a man that had any kind of morals would never say that.
No, I mean, it was disgusting. Like, when I couldn't even believe that it was real. I had to look at it, and that's why I went and found the video to share because I couldn't believe it was real.
Yeah, no, that was disgusting. I can't get into it. I
have
right
no
now.
Words. Yeah.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Whew, okay. Their mail wasn't delivered to them, but they were expected to deliver it to every white man in uniform. They were told not to write home about the conditions. Their letters were censored or disappeared. One woman was reprimanded for calling her mother Mama because it was seen as unprofessional.
Yeah, I wish someone would. I wish they would. And imagine they had to do all that sorting to keep up morale for the army, but they weren't allowed to have morale kept up for them. You
Not
know,
at all.
It's just what in the double standards.
Yeah.
They were denied medical care also. One woman collapsed from exhaustion and hypothermia after working a 12-hour shift. She was just told to walk it off. There was no sick leave. If you had the flu, you worked. If you coughed up blood, you still sorted.
The bathrooms they were assigned were cleaned once a week, if that. Sometimes they were forced to relieve themselves in buckets because the only available latrine was padlocked shut.
This was not wartime chaos. This was deliberate neglect.
And speaking of SA, let's not forget the sexual harassment. Commanding officers groped them under the guise of uniform inspection. Some were cornered in supply closets. They were warned not to report it because accusations against white officers would bring shame to their race.
Some were also assaulted, some were silenced, some never told anyone because they knew that they wouldn't be believed.
I mean, this is just history on repeat every single day.
I know.
I can't even, there are so many situations where women are just consistently assaulted. I mean, now at work, you keep your mouth shut so you can keep your job because you reporting it is you losing your job, not somebody else losing their job.
You're a problem.
You're a problem. All through the military, this is still an issue consistently. I mean, and then women of color, Indigenous women, every woman is so at risk for this. And I'm laughing out of discomfort, not out of it's just the disbelief that we know it's been an issue for centuries. I felt like we were finally making progress, and the backslide that I've seen in the past couple of weeks is just horrifying to me, and it makes me want to cry knowing that my daughter's going to grow up with these men just
Yeah.
around.
Agreed.
And I mean, I know you're feeling it
Yeah.
heavily, but it's rough.
Yes.
So, okay. They were threatened with dishonorable discharge if they spoke out, and even worse, with demotion to laundry detail back stateside, a punishment unit, scrubbing uniforms in bleach, sometimes on hands and knees for 12-hour shifts with open sores and no breaks. That's what stood behind every act of disobedience. I mean, they weren't in bleach, but they were in mold for 12 hours straight with sores. And, whew. So it was not a slap on the wrist, it was a sentence.
They weren't fighting 2 wars. They were actually fighting 3 wars. The Axis powers, the U.S. military, and a country that wanted them gone the minute that their labor was no longer needed.
They were followed in town. White MPs questioned them when they walked alone. One woman was arrested for acting out of uniform because she wore a headscarf in the rain.
They had to carve dignity out of hell, and they did. They made themselves visible in a system that tried to erase them. They protected each other. They protected the mail. They protected the people who would never thank them.
We will not talk about the 6888 in sanitized language. They were not treated as heroes. They were treated as disposable labor at best, as threats at worst.
And still, they never stopped working because even when no one believed in them, they believed in each other. This is a quote from Private Gladys Schuster Carter, one of the members of the 688 Battalion. They said we weren't soldiers. They said we weren't ladies. They said we weren't even human half the time. But we showed up anyway. We sorted their letters. We wore their uniforms. And when we came home, they forgot us. So don't you dare forget us now.
So that brings us to Major Charity Adams Early. She was the first to make them regret underestimating her. Major Charity Adams Early didn't kick open the door. She rewrote the architecture.
When a white general told her he was sending a white officer to supervise her command, she stood up, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "Over my dead body, sir." He backed down.
They hadn't counted on her. She had a degree in math, physics, and Latin. She trained in vocational psychology. She could break down logistical operations like they were equations and build a battalion from scratch with no manual and no respect. She wasn't handed a template. She invented one for every black woman who came after her. It sounded like a curse word the way that I said that. She wasn't handed a template. She invented one for every black woman who came after her. 5 companies, 855 women, a command center that ran cleaner and faster than any they'd ever seen.
They tried to box her in, said Black Women's Army Corps couldn't serve overseas, couldn't lead men, couldn't handle pressure.
She proved them all wrong. She refused to allow her soldiers to enter segregated Red Cross clubs. She rallied them to boycott a club that opened just for them to keep them separate but included. And none of them crossed that threshold. Not one. She taught dignity by example. She wasn't just running logistics. She was teaching rebellion.
They
What?
faced rotten food, blackout shifts, rats, men who tried to grope them, silence from back home, and still, her soldiers all said the same thing. We felt protected under Major Adams because she didn't let anyone mess with her girls.
When the job in Birmingham was supposed to take 6 months, she led them through 17 million letters in 3. She trained her team like it was sacred work, because it was. The letters they delivered were life-saving. They delivered hope, presence, grief, love, all across a war zone that had no place for them, but needed them anyway.
She ended the war as a lieutenant colonel, the highest rank a black woman could reach. And yet, when she came home, there were no parades, no book deals, no medals from the president.
So the Army fixed that. 80 years too late. In 2023, they renamed Fort Lee, a base once honoring Robert E. Lee, to Fort Gregg Adams. Her name now stands where Confederate generals once did. Let that sink in. But now, under Trump's second term, there's talk of undoing it, of putting those Confederate names back, of stripping her legacy again, just like they tried to strip her power in 1945.
Charity Adams Early didn't just serve history, she corrected it. She proved that black women can command in war, can hold the line, and can walk away with more honor than any man who doubted them.
And you want to talk about patriotism? Start with Major Adams, because when the country spit at her, she still carried its letters.
Next up is Mary Ragland. She wasn't prepared for war, but war didn't wait for her to be ready. It came loud, fast, and brutal.
Her journey began in open waters, crossing the Atlantic with nothing but a duffel and a prayer. She wasn't a soldier with a rifle. She was a black woman in army green, ducking German torpedoes and watching the ocean tilt with every evasive maneuver. By the time they hit land, she thought the worst was over. And then a V-1 buzz bomb. Falling from the sky like a death sentence, she hit the ground hard, heart pounding in her ears, and didn't breathe until the explosion never came.
She would later say, "Darn tootin', I got scared," but fear didn't get the final word. She got up and she still got to work.
What they handed her was not glamorous. It was a mountain of mail, again, that no one else had wanted to touch. Rotting letters, forgotten names, lost love from years before, no guidance, no recognition, just an impossible task.
But she made it possible because she created systems from the chaos. She memorized names, cross-referenced units, and made sure that when a mother wrote, "I love you, come home safe," her son got that letter.
She worked in silence. She endured the glares, the muttered slurs, the suspicion from her own uniformed allies. She faced men who didn't want her there and a nation that never planned to honor her, but she didn't flinch. Because someone, somewhere, needed their mail, and she wasn't going to be the reason it didn't arrive.
Mary Raglan wasn't a symbol. She was a soldier. She carried the weight of a system that barely acknowledged her and never once dropped it.
You want to know why morale didn't break? Because women like Mary refused to. Not for the medals, not for the headlines, but for the people. Every soldier, every family, counting on a letter to prove that they hadn't been forgotten.
She wasn't forgotten. Not here. Mary Raglan's story is proof that even when the Lord, even when the Lord looks away,
Looked away on this one. World War II.
Mary Raglan's story is proof that even when the world looks away, Black women keep it running.
God, that just reminded me of if the Lord exists, he has some explaining to do. That was written, something similar was written in the concentration camps in Auschwitz.
I mean, it's true. It is true. It is absolutely true.
I would want a lot of explanation on that one because that.
I struggle with some of the atrocities that have been, like, especially with Gaza currently. What's going on with Gaza, the babies? Like, it breaks my heart every day.
The school fire.
Yeah. Did you see that video I shared with the little kid walking in the fire?
I didn't see that from your story originally, but I did.
Yeah, I shared it.
I mean, we do get the same feed.
I know. I know. That's why I was like, I figured you'd already seen it. That's why I was like, I'm sure she saw it. But yeah, I mean, it's heart-wrenching. And I keep sharing it with people because if they're going to sit here and say pro-Israel stuff, I want to say, like, you need to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. Babies are dying. Babies are being slaughtered. Yeah. All in the name of
ethnic cleansing.
Yes. Okay, moving on to Private Ruth L. James. Ruth L. James stood at the front gate in Rouen, France, May 26, 1945. The sign read, 688 Open House. She was the first face anyone saw, the first impression, the first guard, the first welcome. A Black woman in a pressed uniform, heels planted firmly in the gravel, spine straight as a bayonet.
She wasn't there to sort letters that day. She wasn't inside where the press could photograph stacks of mail. She was out front where history could see her, greeting hundreds of Black soldiers, men who came not out of duty but out of gratitude, to thank the women who made sure that their names hadn't been lost in the chaos.
She welcomed them all. No parade, no script, just her presence. She was the line between war and peace, between duty and dignity.
There were no speeches, no medals handed out at the gate, but Private Ruth L. James held it down like it mattered, because it did. Because being stationed at the front gate wasn't just logistics, it was symbolism. It was honor, it was visibility in a system that made Black women invisible.
We don't have volumes written about Ruth. There's no biography, no statue, no memoir sitting in the Library of Congress, but we have a photograph with a date and a name and a posture that tells us everything.
We don't need 100 pages to know who she was. She was discipline, she was grace, she was the quiet defense of Black excellence on a continent that had tried to break it. And when those men arrived, after marching, fighting, bleeding across Europe, it was Ruth who stood at the gate to greet them home.
She was the welcome committee that no one assigned, the honor guard no one prepared, and the face of a battalion that carried 7 million soldiers' morale on their backs.
Say it with us, Private Ruth L. James. We see her, we remember her, and we place her at the front where she stood all along. And do you want more names? You want the proof that they existed? Here they are. and we'll say each one like a drumbeat against the silence history tried to leave behind. Corporal Dolores Brown, who taught herself shorthand in 2 languages just to track and translate letters misrouted between European friends. She wasn't on anyone's language payroll, she did it anyway, because someone's words deserved to get home.
Sergeant Alma Cotton, who reorganized night shifts so the 17-year-olds in her units could sleep. She gave up her own rest so the others wouldn't break. And when the heating oil ran out, she was the one who lit the stoves with whatever she could find, including parts of her own letters from home.
Private First Class Maddie E. Bostick, who kept a running tally of soldiers named Smith on a strip of ration wrapping. Over 7,500. Every one matched to a unit, a town, a mom waiting for a word. She got arthritis so bad she could barely close her hands by 30. The Army said it wasn't a service-related injury, but we all know better.
Tech 5 Olivia Hooker, who didn't just survive the Tulsa Race Massacre, she carried it with her into every room, every uniform. She joined the Coast Guard Women's Reserve and later worked in logistics support alongside the 688 efforts. She was organizing order long before bombs fell because she'd seen American terror up close.
Sergeant Teresa Florence King, the first Black woman from Iowa to enlist in the Women's Army Corps. She trained women in firearm safety, even though she wasn't allowed to carry a weapon, but she carried herself like one, sharp, pointed, and never to be underestimated.
Private Ann Christian, who smuggled extra food rations into her bunkmates' lockers because some of them were collapsing from hunger and stress. She didn't ask permission, she just asked what they needed.
Corporal Harriet Ida Pickens, one of the Navy's first Black female officers, who crossed paths with the battalion in port coordination and logistics transfer. She used her officer status to pull strings and reroute trucks full of mail that would have otherwise sat and rotted.
Sergeant May Hinton. I love this one. She tracked down a mail truck that had gone missing in France and recovered nearly 3,000 undelivered letters. She wasn't a detective, but she refused to let those voices disappear.
And still alive, Fanny McClendon at 104, she remembers it all. The cold that chewed through your bones, the stink of spoiled packages, the sound of letters arriving from boys who were already dead. We weren't just women, she said. We were the ones who got it done.
Anna Mae Robertson is still with us, still breathing, still watching. Living proof that you can outlast war, racism, and erasure if your backbone's made of steel and your memory's made of fire.
It's something that we all need to carry with us for quite a while. They weren't just Black, they weren't just women, they weren't just support staff or clerks or auxiliary. They were the lifeline, they were the engine of morale. They were the logistical backbone of a segregated army that planned to use them and not remember them.
So we remember them now, with their names, with their stories, with the fury of generations who see what they did and refuse to let it be erased. Say their names, not like a whisper, like a declaration.
They came back to nothing. No medals, no speeches, no welcome home. Reiterating, because it's important to know that they did this, expecting nothing and getting nothing, and it's heartbreaking that we've let it go for so long. Just the same country that sent them off in silence, welcoming them back with even less.
These women carried a world war on their backs. 65,000 letters a day. 3 years of lost hope in warehouses. Mail for the dead, the dying, the desperate. And when it was over, they were just tossed out like expired rations.
No GI Bill, no access to the very benefits that they earned. Why? Because they were Black, because they were women, because America had always been comfortable asking them to save it and then pretending that they never existed.
White men came back to ticker tape and job offers. The women of the 6888 came back to whites only signs, to pay gaps, to denial letters, to streets named after slaveholders while their own names weren't even printed in the damn paper.
You want to talk about rage? Try listening to soldiers say that they couldn't get hired as clerks for jobs they'd just done under bomb threats in a foreign country. Try watching them sit through Veterans Day ceremonies where no one said their name.
Charity Adams Early came back as a lieutenant colonel, highest rank that a Black woman could get. You'd think there'd be statues, schools, something. But for decades, her story lived in the footnotes and in whispers because truth is too uncomfortable for a nation addicted to its own lies.
They were erased deliberately, systematically, strategically, because honoring them would mean admitting what they did. Then they held up a war effort that they never planned to thank them for.
They didn't even get formal recognition until 2022. 77 years. 77 years after clearing 6 months of mail in just 3. After working double shifts in freezing warehouses, after delivering morale to millions, they had to wait. The first bill to honor them, H.R. 1012, introduced in 2021. It took an act of Congress just to say thank you. A thank you that came long after the war ended, after the unit was dissolved, and after most of them had passed on. Because even in death, these Black women had to wait behind white comfort, behind bureaucracy, behind people who didn't want to be reminded that patriotism has never looked just one way.
And let's also point out that while Charity Adams Early, her son received this award, Mike Johnson is the one that gave it to them.
Like, of all people.
Of all people that could have presented that award, it was Mike freaking Johnson.
I would have crashed out. I really would have crashed out.
Like, yeah. Just more knowing now what we know, too. Like, it wasn't just some, like...
random, yeah.
Asshole. Sorry, I'll cut that.
I know.
Out, but, like...
As I was reading this, I was getting more and more incensed, infuriated, and angry for them.
Yeah.
Because it's bullshit.
Yes. Absolute. So no, we don't do quiet reflection here. We do righteous fury. We do historical vengeance, because if you won't carve them into marble, we will carve them into memory.
They didn't come home to roses, so we bring the fire. They weren't given closure, so we give them a reckoning.
For every unmarked grave, every silenced obituary, every time they were asked to serve but never invited to speak, we speak now.
They returned home to a lie, and now we tell the truth loud enough to burn it down.
And I know teaching Black history as white women is BS. Like, let's be honest. But nobody's listening to the Black women that have literally been screaming, crying, and doing everything that they can to have their voices heard. So this is our way to amplify.
Yes, this is the bare minimum that we can do to try to make them have a voice that they've deserved to have.
And I don't know. I'm irritated. I'm angry. And I know while it's not my place to speak it, I just want them recognized. I want to support. And if me supporting is being able to talk to other white women because maybe they'll listen to me, then that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I hope that all of these names, I hope all of these names are names that they've never heard, that people listen in and they say, hey, I should learn more. Like, I didn't really know about the 6888 until a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I knew about the mail sorting, but I didn't realize all the neglect that they faced and everything they endured. And I mean, it's disgusting. It makes me feel physically ill.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff too, where I didn't realize the depth of everything. And while I'm learning it, I teach my child, my oldest one, because my 2-year-old doesn't obviously like.
He'd be like, what?
Me reading him an entire 100-page book on somebody that used to unload ships at ports is not going to be something that he's going to be super into. And while Eva, it doesn't always hold her attention either, it's important for me that I've already gone over that with her, and she's already knowing where to look, and she's already knowing, because I refuse to have a child that is as dense as I was. And I'm not going to take full blame as a child for not knowing that, but it is going to be my fault as an adult if I don't.
Yeah, so, if you don't expose her to the right.
I'm going to expose her to the right things, and I'm going to teach myself in the meantime. But I'm also, I don't know. I feel icky being the one that says anything about teaching Black history and trying to, reiterate a lot of that stuff. But at the same time, women have been screaming at the top of their lungs, and nobody's listening.
Exactly. And I mean, if someone has some more information, we are always open to hearing any criticisms, any kind of critique, anything any of it. Like I feel like we're very open to hearing that. So we want to hear from people of color that have something to say about what we're talking about. Because we're just trying to talk about all of these voices of so many people who were forgotten about because they weren't white.
Give people like us that want to know more, that don't know where to start, somewhere to start. I thoroughly appreciate that it was sacrificed for our country and for us to continue on, but I also don't want to sit here and continue ignoring it when we are trying to erase it, and I refuse to be a part of that problem. I'm not going to be complicit in having history erased and not amplify where I can.
Exactly. Agreed.
So, while America was busy plastering "Thank a Veteran" on bumper stickers, the Trump administration was quietly trying to kill the very system the 6888 held together with blood and backbone. Including the VA, but the USPS and the VA.
We're not going to go there. Yeah,
that'll be another episode.
Yes. We'll get to that in a few weeks. But let's talk facts. In 2020, Trump's hand-picked Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, a Republican mega donor with zero postal experience, was installed like a virus. And what did he do? He slashed overtime. He ripped out mail sorting machines, removed drop boxes, delayed prescriptions, sabotaged ballots. And all the while, he claimed it was just cost cutting. Bullshit.
This was not reform. It was bullshit. Yeah. It was a coordinated political hit on a 240-year-old constitutional institution put in place by Benjamin Franklin, which, again, like the founding fathers, I will agree with what they put into place to try and govern a system, but I would like it to be more inclusive, and I would also like to acknowledge that they were not good people. But because vote by mail threatened the power of the very man who installed him.
The USPS has a 90% approval. The USPS has a 92% approval rating. It serves everyone. Rural, poor, disabled, veterans. Man, the rural juror is really coming for me today, especially veterans. 1 in 5 postal workers is a veteran, and over 30% of postal employees are Black or brown. So gutting the postal service isn't just voter suppression. It's class warfare, racial violence, and a direct assault on the working class, the disabled, and the forgotten.
During COVID, the Postal Service was a lifeline. Medications, PPE, food, ballots. While we were baking sourdough and crying into Zoom, postal workers were out there, masks on, lungs burning, delivering to every single address in the country. And Trump blocked $13 billion in emergency relief, and then said the quiet part out loud: if we don't fund it, they can't vote.
He hijacked the pandemic, he held the Postal Service hostage, and he used the chaos to undermine faith in democracy itself.
This is the same USPS that helped integrate the American workforce, that gave Black families a path to the middle class when no one else would, that still delivers to every corner of this country, no matter the profit margin, and yet they were treated like a disposable utility, because capitalism doesn't know how to value public good unless it can sell it.
And the press, they called it a controversy. No, this was an attack on democracy, on history, on every woman in the 688 Battalion who sorted mail under blackout paint so a soldier could feel seen.
You don't get to wrap yourself in the flag while gutting the very institution that helped win the war.
We were watching then, and we're watching now.
This wasn't a campaign against inefficiency. It was a calculated assault. And in Trump's second term, how many days are we in now? Like 120?
100 and something, yeah.
They didn't even bother hiding it. The Postal Service, our country's oldest public communications institution, became a target, again, and not by accident, by design.
Yeah, Project 2025, cough. The plan is to strip it for parts, merge it with the Commerce Department, turning a constitutional public service into a branch of business, privatize it what they can, sell off what's left, and silence the watchdogs while they're at it.
They already started laying the groundwork in his first term. Again, installing Louis DeJoy. I don't even know if it's Louis or Louis. I don't give a shit. He's a white man that is causing issues.
Republican mega donor. Kick rocks.
I don't care what his name is. I will not name him appropriately. A man with financial conflicts of interest and zero experience as Postmaster General. blocking emergency funding during a pandemic to sabotage vote by mail, decommissioning mail sorting machines in key districts ahead of the 2020 election. But that was the prelude, and now we have the full symphony of destruction.
The sabotage is systemic. They've hollowed out services in rural areas, stalled infrastructure upgrades, frozen hiring, and they tried to end remote postal access for seniors, strip work protections for veterans, and bury delivery standards under red tape.
And while they gaslight the public with promises of efficiency, they've turned the law enforcement arm of the Postal Service into an immigration dragnet. Postal inspectors, whose original mission was to protect the mail, are now aiding in raids, using mail scans, financial tracking, and surveillance to hunt undocumented people under Trump's new executive directives.
That is not delivery, that's persecution. That's
DiGiorno.
fascism. Yes. It's not delivery, it's DiGiorno. It's fascism DiGiorno. It's not delivery, it's persecution, it's fascism wrapped in a tracking number. And let me just tell you, I think it is disgusting that we are using government resources to find illegal immigrants, which I hate that word anyway, undocumented human persons.
I don't like that one either. They're people.
They're humans, they're people. And aliens, like if Lance Gooden says alien one more time, I'm gonna
Don't threaten the government official on the podcast.
It was just a
no matter how much we want.
No, but for real, I get so mad when they talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, and then they use government resources in a way that they're not supposed to be used.
It's just buzzwords in an echo chamber. And that is what we're doing here, is we're creating our own echo chamber with how important these people are, these institutions are, and how everything else that has been happening is extremely important. And we need our own echo chamber. It cannot just be the far-right extreme MAGA cult dictating our future anymore. 22% of the population does not get to dictate for the other 78%.
Their mandate doesn't mean shit to me, I'll tell you that.
And while they tear apart the mission, they are gunning for the memory.
We breezed past it earlier, but let's talk about it in a little more depth now. In 2023, the Army had renamed Fort Lee to Fort Gregg Adams, honoring Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams Early, the highest-ranking Black general and the highest-ranking Black woman of World War II.
Now they're floating renaming it again, and while they have said, because it's tied directly to people, they're going to have a harder time, the Hegseth has said he's going to have a hard time renaming something after it's been renamed after another person of great significance. So that is a roadblock, but I don't think they care.
They don't care
about roadblocks. So yeah, they're floating renaming it again, rolling back the progress, scrubbing the plaques, pretending it never happened. They've already reversed Fort Liberty back to Fort Bragg, and they're calling it a return to tradition. We call it what it is, a rollback into whitewashed authoritarianism.
And don't let anyone tell you it's just talk. They've already priced it out. $2.4 million to erase Charity Adams Early's name from the fort that bears her legacy. That means that someone sat down, calculated the cost, and still thought it was worth it.
This is not about budget. We know that this is not about budget. This is about control. Control over who gets remembered, what democracy looks like, and the systems that keep us connected and informed.
Because if you can sabotage the mail, you can sabotage the vote. If you can erase the history, you can erase people. And if you can replace Fort Gregg Adams with the name of a Confederate, you can rebrand fascism as heritage.
The Postal Service is not a business. It is a lifeline, a battlefield, a mirror of who this country serves and who it leaves behind. They wanted it gutted like the women we just told you about, but we are not letting them do it quietly.
We've sorted through the lies, we've stamped this history with truth, and we are delivering it first class.
The 6,888th Postal Directory Battalion sorted 17 million letters in 3 months. They cleared decades of backlog by hand, under threat, in silence, 3 separate times. No parade waited for them, no White House welcome. They went home to the same America that had tried to erase them before they ever shipped out and couldn't even walk through all of the doors.
But they didn't break. They stood, they worked, and they dared to prove that a system that underestimated them would fail without them.
You want to honor the past? Then you better fight for the institutions they built, because the Postal Service is not just mail, it is a monument, a battlefield, and a promise, and right now that promise is being ripped apart.
Every vote by mail ballot, every check to grandma, every prescription bottle, every eviction notice, every birthday card, every last letter from a soldier who never made it back. That is the weight of this institution, and the people dismantling it don't give a damn.
This is the part where we decide. Do we speak their names just to sound reverent, or do we speak them to stay loud and ungovernable and afraid?
I vote for ungovernable.
I do too, if we can say it better.
Yeah. I like to be ungovernable at all costs.
Same.
Ungovernable. That's so hard to say.
Good
but
trouble.
I really do like it. Yes, good trouble always. You can call
Shout
your
out
rep.
to John Lewis. Sorry.
Is that what his name is?
John Lewis, yeah, the doctor. He was a civil rights activist.
Oh.
He's the good trouble guy.
You can call your rep. You can fight budget cuts. You can defend the right to vote by mail. But start with this. Know who they were and do not let anyone bury them again.
Also, back to John Lewis. Did you know that I have a book about John Lewis for Eva?
I did not know that, but of course you do. Of course you do.
Dear America, to the veterans who walked routes in snow so kids could get birthday cards, to the grandmothers who kept stamps and coffee cans and knew every mail carrier by name, to the 6888 who served a country that treated them like a rumor, we remember.
To the politicians trying to sell the postal system to the highest bidder, we see you, and we're not letting you do it in the dark. You can strip the titles, you can starve the budget, but we will drag this history into the light every damn time.
If you want to honor the 6888, start here. Demand Congress protect the USPS from privatization. Flood your feeds with their names. 6888, Charity Adams Early, Save USPS. Learn who these women really were. And call out every effort to rename Fort Gregg Adams and any other military institution back to anything that reeks of the Confederacy.
These women saved the soul of a system. The least we can do is save the story. Follow us on TikTok at Moms and Machines and Facebook, Instagram at Moms Against the Machine.
This one is personal because we send letters too. To our kids, to each other, to a country we still hope will get better.
We are Moms Against the Machine, and this week we wrote back.
And stamped it with fire.